Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How are you guys? Here is Usama Tahir and you're watching Learn English with Usama Tahir. Students, nowadays I'm making series of lectures on a single topic and concept for the detailed knowledge. As I have explained the learning theories in the series of lecture, it was having three parts. So now I want to teach you about the language teaching methods. There are a number of language teaching methods. First of all, I will define what is a language teaching method, and it has multiple types. And then I'm going to make video lecture on one teaching method in one day, and there will be series of lectures on it. So first of all, let me explain you what is a language teaching method. Language teaching method is a method that is used by the teacher, okay, in the classroom to teach you the foreign language, to teach you the second language, teach you the non-native language to the students. This method, what is meant by method? Method is the way of doing something, right? A method will have principles, method will have set of principles that the teacher will follow in teaching the foreign language. For example, a course of conduct for language teaching will be given to the teacher in the form of the language teaching method, and teacher will follow all the rules and regulations and principles that is written in that method, right? If the method says that more attention should be given to speaking, then teacher will be more concerned with your speaking abilities. And if method says that you should be good at writing, then teacher will be strict in teaching you the writing skills. So there are multiple methods, and every method there are different principles, and every method has different point of view of seeing language, of the utility of language, and of how language should be taught, right? In the language learning theories, we discussed how a child learns his or her native language, but in language teaching methods we are going to deal with how you can teach the foreign language, how you can teach the second language to the students, okay? There are multiple ways, and we are going to discuss these multiple ways in the series of lectures, right? And the method for today is grammar translation method. Students, this is the oldest method in language teaching, in foreign language teaching. This is the oldest teaching method you have ever encountered with, okay, you will ever encounter with. If in any case, most of the students from the Pakistan, India will say, yeah, they have learned this way, because when I tell them the principle, they will say, oh, it was the method that was used in their schools, in their academies, in their colleges. So let's move forward. This is very interesting, very intriguing, and if you stay there, you will learn a lot of new things and facts. This is like the factual knowledge. This is not a method. This is like, this is a method, but this method will tell you how a teacher teaches you the language. There is always a way and layout. So the most popular teaching method in 15th century, this method is very old, like 500 to 600 years old. Now we are in 21st century, and this method was popular method since 15th century. How old is that? Okay, basics of the method, you should know the basics, then I will further explain its principles and advantages and history. Everything will be given in this video lecture, because I believe that you should not go anywhere else. If you watch my video lecture, it should be comprehensive, and it should be in that much detail that you should not need to go to wander about anywhere else to understand the whole concept. So basics of the method is grammar translation classes, or the grammar translation method, are commonly conducted in the native language of the students. So teacher will use the mother tongue, the first language, for teaching the target language. This method in Pakistan, teacher will use Urdu for teaching English language. Yes, teacher will use the mother language for teaching the second language. A teacher will say, this is noun in Urdu, ये noun है, इसको ऐसे करते हैं, इसको यूं करते हैं, इसका ये meaning है, ठीक है? This is how the teacher will teach you. Students learn the vocabulary and grammar rules from the teacher. Students learn the vocabulary and grammar rules from the teacher or a book, and practice by doing drills and translating exercises. There will be vocabulary studies, okay, there will be study about the grammar, maybe from the book or maybe from the teachers. A teacher may be having the notes or anything like that. And there will be translation exercises. I mean, you are going to translate from mother language to the second language and from the second language to the mother language. The translation will be bidirectional in two ways. And translation, as the clear from the name, is grammar translation method. The major focus will be on the grammatical aspects, on the grammatical rules, on the grammatical features, and as well as on the translation. These two things will be focused in this method, right? From this you can say that reading and writing will be focused, and no interest is of the teacher on your speaking or the listening skills or any creative skill, because you are going to translate as it is, word by word, from your native language to the second language or from the second language to your native language. And you are going to memorize the rules and regulations like a parrot. You are going to learn the vocabulary from the second language to your native language, because this method discusses the direct translation, focuses on the direct translation of one language into another. So this is how the whole phenomena works in this method. This was the basics of the method. I will explain a lot more in the next slide. Let's move forward. Before describing the principles, the historical background. Students, this method is very significant if we study it in the historical perspective. Then we'll get to know that how this method was initiated and why it was initiated. It was originated in 15th century. I have described it earlier, when Latin was to be taught, which was a dead language. Okay, which was a dead language. This is the main point here. Students, this method was originated or initiated for teaching the students about the dead language. Latin and Greek was dead in 15th century. The students used to learn that language literature to accommodate themselves with the wisdom and the knowledge, because a lot of knowledge has been written in Latin and Greek, and a lot of knowledges have been translated from Latin and Greek into English and other languages, because they were very wise and because they were philosophers. Latin and Greeks, every knowledge comes from and a lot of terms comes from the Latin and Greek. So there was a need to translate that knowledge from the Latin and Greek to the other languages. So students were introduced with that method, so they can be able to translate from Latin and Greek to their native languages. So basic aim was not to teach the language, but aim was to teach about the language, or make them able enough to translate into their native languages. So the students were not able to speak Latin or Greek, or were not able to listen Greek and Latin and understand, but they were able to read and write and translate the Latin and Greek. So this was the basic historical background of this method, and remained popular from 1840s to 1940s in European countries. Then it was accepted for teaching other European languages and French and other languages, and it remained popular in 1840s to 1940s. Like, it remained popular for a complete 100 years. So it was a very popular method, and a lot of researches has been conducted on this method about its advantages as well as the disadvantages. Okay, in USA, GTM method was known as Prussian method. In USA, there was also a book written by a writer, and who compared the grammar translation method and the Latin Greek studies. Next is faculty psychology approach. This method is based on the faculty psychology approach. What this approach says, this is a psychological approach. Mental discipline was essential for strengthening the power of the mind. So this method was basically to teach you about the Latin and Greek, basically to strengthen your mind with the wisdom of Latin and Greek, because the basic aim was to teach you about the philosophies and the knowledges of the Latin and Greek, and not to teach you of the language, but about the language, so you can translate it. So the basic aim was to strengthen the powers of the mind with this method. So this method is based on the faculty psychology approach. This is a very important historical key point which no teacher usually tells to their students, so you can write in your paper in your exam to impress your teacher. Next is we have basic aims and goals of the method. Aims means and goals means what the method want to achieve, what this method will what the teacher want to achieve by using that method. This is the basic question that every student should know and every teacher should also be aware of. First of all is to study literature of target language. So the basic aim in the mind, in the eye of the teacher is to teach you about the literature of the target language. For example, in the case of Latin and Greek, to teach you about the Latin, Greek literatures, okay, because they were very wise, they were philosophers, and to strengthen the mind of the students, teachers want to study the literature, to teach you the literature of the target language. And how will you learn them? You will translate them, you will translate the reading passage, and you will learn the literature. Okay, what will be the next one is studying the literature has the goal to strengthen mind. So basic aim was to study the literature, and the aim of studying literature was to strengthen mind and to empower mind with wisdom and knowledge. Next is basic importance is given to reading and writing skills. So whenever you are talking and your goal is literature, right, then you will give more importance to reading and writing skills instead of speaking and listening skills, right? All of the knowledge of Latin and Greek were not in audio cassettes, was not on the YouTube, was not on the Google, was not on the podcast in the form of, so all of the knowledges were in the books, okay, in the notes. So the basic importance to give was on reading and writing skills, because it was also only these two skills were needed at that time, or only two these skills were focused in this method. Sentence making ability was emphasized. So sentence making ability was very much important, because when you are going to translate a passage, you will have the sentences, and you should know the syntax, and you should have the capacity to make the sentences in the target language and from the target language to your native language. So sentence making ability was emphasized. Next one is accuracy was stressed. In this method there is no space for mistakes, because you are going to learn their literature, you are going to directly translate. So if there is a mistake, there will be a mistake in the concept. So accuracy was stressed, and accuracy was very significant in that method. Okay, principles of the method, the rules of the methods the principles will be in the mind of the teacher, and teacher will follow these principles in teaching any language, whether it's Greek, whether it's Latin, whether it's any French, English, whatever. Because from 1840s to 1940s, this method was used to teach number of other languages like English, like French, like Spanish, others. So the first principle is detailed analysis of grammar rules. So a lot of importance has been given to the analysis of grammar rules of the target language. You will learn the rules of the grammar from the second language, from your target language to the native language. Like we study when a sentence have ta hai, ti hai, te hai, then we will do this. If the sentence has chuka tha, chuke the, kar gaya tha, hua tha, I mean we give a lot of importance in the grammar translation method over here in Pakistan. So this is we can say that we are using the modified form of grammar translation method. Okay, we give detailed analysis of grammatical rules here in Pakistan, here in India, when we are learning tenses. So similarly, they give a lot of importance in their teaching classes as well. Grammar rules will be implemented in translating passage in and out of the target language. Now what is the use of those grammatical rules? These grammatical rules will be used in the translation of passages, right? Next is grammatical rules memorization and implementation. Now these grammatical rules, okay, right, grammatical rules are memorized and not learned with any concept, but they were memorized like parrot memorize something. Next is first language as a reference system. Now I told you about ta hai, ti hai. Now you're giving reference from your first language for the target language. So similarly, whatever the medium of instruction will be the native language, whether it's Spanish, French, and you're teaching, for example, English, then you will use Spanish to teach English. Your reference system would be your first language. And if you are in the Pakistan, your reference system would be Urdu, and you will be teaching English language. Next is medium of instruction will also be first language. So reference system will also be the first language, and the medium of instruction, teacher will use the first language to teach you the second language. It seems funny that you're teaching the second language but you're still using the first language, but this was a principle introduced in this method. So no more labor by the teacher to present the lecture in the second language. He or she can use the first language to teach you the second language. How funny is that? We always encounter such situations in Pakistan and India and outer circle countries where the English is taught to us by using first language, and we don't get the proper information of listening and speaking skills because of this approach. Okay. Next one is reading and writing skills are main focus. So your main focus is reading and writing skills, because you are going to read the passage, you are going to translate the passage. So your reading and writing skills are mainly involved in this activity. You are learning the vocabulary for the reading skills, you're learning the vocabulary for the writing skills, you're learning the grammar for writing better. So all of these things are mainly focused with your writing and reading skills. Next is bilingual word lists are provided, because your medium of instruction is the first language, and also the system reference is also the first language. So bilingual word lists are provided. You are not provided with the synonyms. For example, a teacher is teaching you English, he will or she will give you the bilingual word list, that translation of the words, that the meaning of words in your language, in your native language. Right. Next is students memorize words and their meanings which will be in their first language, like bilingual word list. Much emphasis is given to sentence making as the most important goal of this method, because sentence making is a very crucial, very important, because if you have no idea how to make sentence, you will have no understanding of the passage, and you have no ability to translate. Right, you should know the how to make a sentence to conduct everything in that method. Accuracy is emphasized. You should be accurate, because this is the main principle. Next is deductive method of teaching grammar. So there are two methods of teaching grammar. First I will explain these two methods, and then I will tell you deductive method of teaching grammar. So inductive method of teaching grammar and deductive method. Inductive method is the student learns the grammatical rules and discovers grammatical rules by himself, by reading a lot of passages and material. For example, a student will read a complete book, or for example not a book but a complete chapter, and tells you, I discovered that whenever there comes a he, there is a s after the verb. Teacher hasn't told the student explicitly about that he s or es will come after he she it, but student discovers that phenomena by himself. Then this method will be inductive, the student discovering rules by himself. But deductive method is rules are explicitly directly told to student, is the deductive method, that I tell my student that you will add s or es after he she it. This is a deductive method, and if I let them discover by their own, it will be inductive method. So then in this method, deductive method of teaching grammar was introduced, that student will explicitly or directly tells the grammatical rules to their students, and not let them discover this by their own. Next is no attention is given to speaking or listening skills, which is very bad, I think. I mean, this is a very bad principle, but there was no need because in this method your basic aim or goal was to learn the literature, and you don't need to speak that language or or having the listening skills. So for them it was good. But if you're teaching the modern languages by using this this method, and you also included that principle, then it's very bad, because for communication you should have the listening and writing skills, and for knowing the language it's okay. But if you are knowing about the language, then it's okay. But if you want to learn the language, you should have that abilities. Focus on morphology and syntax. A lot of focus was given on morphology. Like, what is morphology? The study of words, that how you can new words. Like, from agreement you make disagreement, from agree you make agreed, from whatever you make new sentences by adding suffixes and prefixes, like attain to attainment. So this knowledge is very much focused in that method, that how you can make new words, and syntax, that how you can form these sentences. Reading of difficult passages early in the course. In this method, students provide the difficult passages to students early, at the very early stage, at the very beginning stage, which is sometimes very frustrating for the students. Yeah, it is. Focus is mainly upon translating from target language to first language and vice versa. Okay. Exciting fact. What is the exciting fact here is, still this method is used in some parts of the world to teach living languages. So I told you this method was first used to teach the dead language like Latin and Greek, but people or the teachers and institutions started using it to teach living languages. And now you're teaching the living language by the method that was first used for teaching the dead language. How creepy is that? How stupid is that? Or you can say, how naive is that? Still, this method is used in some parts of the world to teach living languages, like in Pakistan, in India, and some other outer circle countries. Okay, you think that why if there is stupidity, why teachers are still using it? Why it is still being used? Then there are some facts that why people, why countries, why institutions use it, and we will further revolve this. We will further discuss it in the later slides. Stay tuned. Stay here. So, what are the advantages of the method? It is the shortest and easiest way of explaining meanings of words and phrases. That's why a teacher uses them, still uses them, because it's the shortest and the easiest way of explaining the meaning of words and phrases. For example, if you tell someone about the meaning of an English word in English, it will be very hard for that person to understand or to fully comprehend the meaning. If you tell the multiple synonyms, then he or she will be able to understand, and you will have to give a lot of effort for that. But if you totally directly translate that word into their native language, they will say, yeah, I get it. They will say, yeah, in my language it is said like that. Yeah, this is the meaning of that word. In my language, I totally get it. So it is the easiest and shortest route. That's why teacher use it. And medium of instruction is first language, which makes it easy for the learner and teachers to conduct learning. So people go for the easy things. Whatever happens, they don't go for the consequences, but they go for, if something is easy, people will be attracted to it. So this method was easy because of its medium of instruction in the first language, and it's always easy to use your first language instead of the second language. So teachers were happy and the students were happy because they were going to use their first language for learning the second language. They don't understand that it would not be beneficial, but they see that it's easy, so they go for it. Next is labor saving, as no effort is made on using target language as a medium of instruction. If teacher would have been using the second language, it would have been very hard on the hand of the teacher and as well on the hand of the students, because student will give would have to give a lot of effort to comprehend, and teacher would have to give a lot of effort to speak the second language. So it was easier. And next is, if you want to know about literature of the target language, then this is the best method available, because in some parts of the world we are just teaching the literature, English literature, to the students about knowing the books and this and that. So this method is applicable and is very feasible in such situations. Okay, we we had advantages. Similarly, we have some shortcomings in this method. First is teaching about language and not the language itself. This is the main thing. This is the main shortcoming, that this method is teaching you about the language, about the history, about the literature of that language, about everything about the language, but not the language itself. You are not going to learn the language, but you are going to know about the language, that what is the history of the language, what are the writers of that language, what is the literature of that language, but you have no capacity, you have no skill to use that language. They are not teaching you the language, but they are teaching you about the language. This is the fact. This is the major shortcoming in this method. speaking or any other creative output was missing. There was no creativity. There was no creativity, whether in the form of any output, whether it's writing skills or it's speaking skills, because speaking is ignored and the writing will only focus on the translation. So translation is no creative. It's like a drill, it's like a memorization and something other than creativity. Next we have student has passive role, teacher has the active role. Teacher is telling you the meanings, teacher is giving you the passages, teacher is telling you the grammatical rules. Then where is the student? They are just the passive listeners. They are just they have just the passive role, and little attention is paid to communication. There is, I mean, if you are using that method, student won't be able to communicate in that language you are teaching. Okay, like in 15th century they taught Latin and Greek, but student has no ability to communicate in these two languages. Similarly, if you are still using that method, your student would be very bad in the communication skills, or would have zero communication skills in that language, because they will not be taught the speaking and listening skills. So how would they be able to communicate? Next is less attention is paid to content. You are not supposed to think about the content. You are just a robot and you are just translating from in and out of your native language, from first and second language. So there is no attention is paid to the content, but the structure and grammatical rules are mainly focused. Next is direct translation is sometimes misleading. You know, when we directly translate something from one language to another, the actual meaning is totally missed out, because every language has its own taste, culture, traditions, and when you translate something into another language, you cannot get the exact meaning, because their language has their own taste, and the word and the energy of that word in their language is different, will be different. And when you totally and directly translate it without taking care of the actual content, it would be very hard for saving yourself from misleading. Monotonous and boring on the hand of learner, it is a very boring method. Student will be crying, student will say what is that, there will be a long drills and there will be no creativity, there will be no entertainment for the students. So it is monotonous and boring on the hand of learner, and lack creative aspect of the language, that you are not going to use the language creatively, but you are using the language like mathematics. So that was all today in this video lecture, and I thought I tried my best to cover all of the things related to this method, and if still missing, you can tell me, and you can comment, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.